Hi guys, Samantha from Jessama Tutorials here, and today I'm going to be showing you a simple version of making faux agate. So, what you're going to need first is some translucent clay. Now you can use any translucent, but I'm using Primo because I find it's pretty translucent compared to most translucents, and so I'd recommend either using Primo white translucent, Cernit translucent, or Pardo translucent. Kato and Fimo aren't really translucent enough for this. So what you'll do is, I'm not going to condition it because we're going to do that in a second, and you're going to want to break it off into little lumps because we're going to add alcohol ink to this to give it some colour. Now the reason I'm using alcohol inks and not paints and other colours of polymer clay is because the alcohol inks are translucent, and so therefore won't hinder the translucency of the translucent. If you added colours of polymer clay, like maybe reds, blues, greens, whatever colour you want, those are opaque, and so they'd decrease the translucency of your translucent. So you'll just take this and bundle it into a ball, or at least try to bundle it into a ball. We want it to not be conditioned at the moment because we're going to add alcohol inks to it, and the alcohol inks make it fairly soft already. So I'll just use those for the moment, and I've got, I believe it's an Andrek alcohol ink, and I'm using the amethyst. And I'm just going to put 3 drops onto that one and just smooth it out with my finger. You of course could just use a cloth. Well, not a cloth, I mean. You could of course just use a brush, but I'm not too worried about it. Then I've got another Andrek one, and this one's Sailboat Blue. And I'll brush that one onto it too. And now we need to let these dry before we mix them in, because we want that moisture to go. And I'll come back when these are dry and then we'll mix them in. Okay, so the alcohol ink has dried a bit, and it's now safe for us to mix it in, because if you mix moisture into polymer clay, it can cause cracks and bubbles and air pockets and all sorts of things later on, so it's best to try and avoid mixing moisture into this. Now the alcohol inks aren't completely dried, of course, but they're dry enough that they're not wet. So what you'll do is you'll just fold it over on each other and mix it in by hand, because of course if you put this through the pasta machine, you can imagine that you're going to get ink all over your pasta machine, and that's going to first off be a mission to clean, and you might not even be able to clean it off properly. So I prefer to do this by hand, just by folding it over. So you can see that even though I used quite a small amount of ink on this translucent, it's coloured it pretty well. So you'll just fold it and roll it basically, and this will condition it for you, and it will mix in that ink. Now you have 2 choices. You can either mix this until it is one completely solid colour, which is what I'm going to do, or you could leave streaks in it if you wanted to. It doesn't have to be completely mixed. And it mixed fairly quickly. So as you can see, that's basically the colour that we're going to get. And so you don't need much ink to colour your translucent. Now if you're wondering what that one was, I decided I wanted a green, and so that's translucent with Andrek clover on it. Oh wait, Arondak, I think that's what it's called. I can never pronounce it properly. Arondak, I think it is. Okay, so that one's mixed. I'm going to mix these two and then I'll come back when I've got all three mixed up. Okay, so I've got all three colours mixed up. So I've got a purple, a green and a blue. So now what I'll do is I'll just pop those to the side, and you're going to want to go and grab a bit of white. And now usually if you haven't got ink all over your fingers, you're going to want to go and add a slight amount of ink to your white. But this is why I like working with the ink on my fingers, because we don't want pure white in our agate. We want it to be a slight off-white. So when I condition it, I like to do it with my fingers while they have ink on it, so that I get some cross-contamination on it, and that way I can get it to be off-white without having to pop more ink onto it. So you'll just condition it like you normally do, and I've got about enough ink on that, so I'm going to just go ahead and run it through my plastic machine a few times. And there wasn't much ink on there, it was just enough to make it off-white, which takes the brightness off it. Okay, so there we are. So yeah, that's about off-white. Now what I'm going to do is just going to go ahead and wipe off my fingers with a rag to get off as much of the excess ink as possible. Okay, now what we'll do is I'll just pop that to the side, and I'm going to be working with the blue and the green first, and I'm just going to roll this one out into a ball. And I'm just going to take a tiny bit each time, and I'm going to set it across each other like that, and then I'm going to take some white and I'm going to roll it into a ball, and I'm going to pop that there. Take a little bit of the blue as well, so that it forms a square. Now take some green again, and I'll pop that one on top of the blue. Take some white and I'll pop that over there. I'll take another green, and it doesn't matter how big the balls are, random is best. So you'll have it so that you have another 4, and just try to keep it in a square shape, and then you'll just stack on top of each other over and over and over again, like I'm doing right now, until you have a fairly large plug. And now I wanted the green to be the dominant colour in this piece, but you can use any colours you want. So I'm going to carry on stacking these, and I'll come back when I have got a nice big piece, and then we can make a dagger out of it. Okay, so I've formed a fairly large plug. Now one thing that I did forget to mention before is that near the top you're doing your 2 colours and white, but as I go down I like to include some plain translucent, and as I reach the bottom I cut off the white completely and I substitute it with just translucent. So towards the top it's just white and the 2 colours, in the middle it's white, the translucent and the 2 colours, and towards the end is the translucent and the 2 colours. And the translucent will be the bottom of the dagger and the white will be the top of the dagger. I went and had a look at some pictures online, and I just found that a lot of the daggers had a lot of plain translucent towards the bottom of the dagger. So I just added it for a realistic look. Now what you're going to do is you're going to just roll it into a cylinder, and you're going to start twisting it. Don't crack it, you just want to be twisting it so that you form lines. And don't worry about it getting too long, We'll sort that out in just a tick. Make sure that you get lots and lots and lots of lines. That's the most important thing. Now it's important to remember which end the translucent was on. So I'm just rolling it out and I'm twisting until I like the look of what I've got. And towards the ends you'll find that they don't twist as much as the ones near the middle. Make sure you don't forget those, because you want the entire thing to have lots of lines, just like real agate. Okay, so this is about enough. Now what we're going to start doing is we're going to start compressing it back together again. Now you don't want folds, you don't want to fold over each other like that. You want to just compress it into each other, like so. And then once you've done that, you'll roll it again, just to smooth out those corners, and then you'll compress it again. Now this is going to be a fairly large dagger, I think. I might compress it enough so that I can cut this in half. So I'm just going to compress it into a square, or basically a cube. Okay, so I've got a cubish shape, and I will go ahead and I'll cut this in half and I'll come back when I've got that. Okay, so went and got my blade, and now we're just gonna cut that in half. I'm gonna open it up and it looks like that inside, which you don't want. So all you'll do is you'll just go to the edges and you'll fold it in on itself so that you close up that inner area, because we don't want that bit. And then we'll just roll it out again to get rid of that seam. And then because there's a seam over there, we're going to twist it again just to hide up that seam a bit. Now the ideal thing, of course, would be just to work with the right amount of clay so that you don't have to do this, but often you're not lucky enough to do that, because I often find that I misjudge how much clay I'm using, and I'm sure you guys have the same problem, which is fine. So you'll just twist it more. It's always good to twist some more. Okay, once you've done that, just compress it back down like that. And the whole point of this is to really warp these lines and to just get the colours folding in on each other, and so that when you bake this and the translucent becomes, well, translucent, you'll be able to see a lot of depth in the piece. Okay, so now what we do is you'll remember which one has the white and which one has the translucent, and the part that has the translucent, you'll just start pinching the bottom till you form it into a point. And then you'll just carry it on up and you'll get into a rough dagger shape. And then to form that dagger shape up, you'll gently roll it against your work surface. Like so. And then just make sure that you smooth up the top here as well. And that's basically your dagger. Now I'll show you what this one looks like. And this one I'm not going to finish up the seam. I'll show you what it looks like with the seam. So I'll just roll out this end to get that into a dagger shape. And now you want it to go from a really smallish point to a quite blunt end. You want to get that looking as even as possible. And you don't want it being too long either. It can be a little hard to get it just right. So I'm fairly happy with that. Just gonna blunt up the end a little bit, and that's basically what I want it to look like. I want it to have a nice curve to it. Now what you want to do, now that you've got it into the shape that you like, you're going to take your fingers and you're just going to run it along your dagger, well turning it, and this gets rid of a lot of the fingerprints, because sanding these, it will be quite a mission. So I like to smooth it out before I bake. And just take some time to make sure that you've got all of those fingerprints wiped out, because to sand those fingerprints out is going to be a mission. Not just because of the shape, but because fingerprints just generally are a pain to sand out. So be careful once you've done that, and then that would go in the oven, and I'll come back when I've got these finished up out of the oven. See you there. Okay, so these just came out the oven and they've cooled off. Now they're quite dull at the moment, as I'm pretty sure you can see, but that's because we haven't sanded them yet. When it comes to translucents, sanding is an extremely important part of getting them to go translucent and getting them to their best. So what I like to use are these sanding papers, which are almost like sanding cloths really. And I go from a 400 grit all the way up as far as I can go. And they come in different colours depending on different grits. So this is a 400. And this is a 600, I think. This is a 1200, I think. Hold on a second. This is a 2000, 4000, 6000. I'm guessing at those grits, but that's basically the highest you can go, and really it's soft. And these are absolutely great for sanding up beads. So all you do is you just hold them in your hand, and you just start sanding around the bead. And this is really just to get it to a shine. It's not to get off any fingerprints, because we got those off before we baked them. If we wanted to sand off fingerprints, you'd want to get wet dry sandpaper and go from a 400 up to a 2000 and then start on the sanding papers. So I'm going to go ahead and sand both of these, and I'll come back when I've got them finished sanding. See you there. Okay, so I've sanded these so that they've got a nice sheen to them. And now what we need to do to finish them off, so we need to drill them, and I'm going to varnish them with varathane. So when I drill, I like to use a hand drill. You can use a power drill, you could also use a piercing pin, but I like a hand drill. Now there's two types over here. There's this one which you have to twist by hand, or there's this one which twists by itself, which is the one that I prefer in this case. So I'm just going to position it where I want it, and then just start pumping this handle up and down so that it drills right through the clay. And that's really all there is to this one. Now I'm going to show you how to use the handheld one, because I'm sure some of you don't have a drill like that one. So if you're using a handheld drill, you'll position it where you want it, and then you'll just push and twist, and then you'll continue doing this until you have something that looks kind of like a guide hole. It only goes a certain way into the bead. You'll go over to the other side and you'll drill another guide hole. And the reason I do this is because with the hand drill, if you push through all the way without making two holes on either side, the side that your drill comes out of will have cracks in it. That doesn't seem to be the case with the other drill that I showed you previously, but I've just found that it does this with the hand drill. So I like to swap sides occasionally, and this seems to prevent cracking and it makes the going a lot easier. So this one of course takes a lot more time and a lot more effort, but that other one that I showed you, the what you would call an automatic, I guess, it only works in some cases. Sometimes the beads that you're using don't work with that, so it's good to have a hand drill. And then if you want to widen up the holes, you start with a small drill and then you work up through the drill sizes. There you go. It just makes it easier. There we go. So that's those drilled. Now I'm going to go and get a rack that I can hold these, that I can string these onto so that they can dangle like this once I have varnished them. So I'll go ahead and do that, and then I'll come back when we're ready to varnish. See you there. Okay, so I've got my beading racks and I've handmade these out of cardboard because the only ones available seem to be metal, and from experience I've found that metal in the oven causes it causes dips in the heat, and it basically causes heat spikes and makes the temperature unpredictable. And so I like to remove as much metal from my oven as possible, and so these were made originally for me to bake beads in the oven, but I also find that they're great for varnishing. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to move this aside for a second because we're not going to use it for a little while. And I'll string the beads onto here, well, a bead onto here, and I've got a little bottle of varnish. This is Varathane, but you can use any varnish that's recommended. Now when it comes to varnish, only certain varnishes are compatible with polymer clay. Ginger's got a really good article on that, and I'll provide a link for that in the description below. But basically, when you varnish polymer clay, make sure that you know what varnish you're using, because some varnishes are not compatible and will cause lots of problems in your clay. They can cause melting and all sorts of things. So I'll just take the brush and brush the one side, then turn it over and varnish the other. And if you look closely, you can see that I'm holding it at the top here to keep my beads steady, and I will varnish the top when I pop it on the rack. So that one's done for the moment. And I'll bring this over. Sorry, I'm speaking a little bit weird because I've got a brush in my mouth. There we go. Now I'll grab this and gently position it. There we go. Gently position it between the cardboard so that it's not touching anything, and then varnish the top. And I will leave that there for about 24 hours to maybe 12 hours to make sure that it is properly to make sure that the varnish is properly dried. And you can leave it like that and then string it in all sorts of things, but what I like to do is bake the varathane on. I will bake it for generally around 15 minutes at a rather low temperature. So primo, hold on a second. Primo has an oven temperature of about 130 Celsius. I'd bake these when they have the varathane on them at around 100 Celsius. Just because I want to keep the temperature low and not burn the varathane. But the varathane is bakeable. And what it does is it makes it really nice and hard on the bead so that you can't actually pick it off. So it strengthens the coating. So I highly recommend baking it, but just bake it at like 100 Celsius. So you need to have made sure that your beads are properly baked before then, because 100 Celsius isn't really going to do much for your beads. So anyway, I'd let these sit for 12 hours and I'll come back in the morning once I've baked them and I'll show you what they look like. See you there. Okay, so I've just finished baking these and I've let them cool, and because we did the varathane on them and I kept the pins in these holes, you will find that these pins will have stuck to the clay, so you'll want to just fiddle around with them a little bit and work the pins out. Do this slowly because you don't want to accidentally break something or maybe rip the varathane. That shouldn't happen, but there's a possibility for it to happen, so it's better to be safe than sorry. So this is basically it really. These are my faux agate beads. Now, while I was waiting for these to dry, I also did some purple ones using the purple clay and the white clay that we had left, and I basically did the exact same thing as I did with these, except I only had purple, white and translucent. So at the beginning of the video, I'm sure you will have seen those purple beads, and that's basically what the purple plus the white plus the translucent looks like. So you can see there's infinite variations of this technique, and you could try doing some red ones and maybe get some red agate. You could do some blue ones and maybe try getting blue lace. Maybe even Botswana agate with some black and brown and red. You could try this out, and I'd love to see what you come up with, because it's always a joy to see what you guys make with my tutorials. And so please, if you do try this technique and you do try making some faux agate daggers, I'd love to see what you've made. Please do post them on my Facebook page, as I always look forward to seeing your work. And as always, if this tutorial was helpful to you, please do have a look at the links below, as there'll be links to more tutorials like this one, and I hope to see you in the next video. Bye for now.